when I was younger, I used to think that there are massive differences between people of the ancient era, Middle Ages, Industrial Ages, modern times. Uh, there are certainly different types of souls that choose to incarnate in a certain order. Uh, but there are a lot of similarities that I've encountered when I used to be a judger type when I was younger. When I got older, uh, perceiving there are certainly similarities. Like one could easily say, oh, when I was younger, I was judging that slavery, throughout history, very irrational, right? For an economic system using for agriculture and such and such, particularly for certain crops over others. I thought that was irrational, right? And it turns out it's not the slavery act itself. Obviously, that is certainly barbaric, along with numerous other things I've read in history. Foot binding, China. Too many other examples. I'm not gonna list them all. As a historian, let's see. But it's the thought process of for humans and the average person. There's always going to be fringes in every human society on Earth in all time periods, but there are always fringes. But the average person or a substantial plurality, um, you know, will conform. So, this type of person is in every society, regardless. When I was younger, I thought, oh, in modern society, no, 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 that's not quite it. Um, like, I always knew there was some conformity, but, I still had this implicit bias to favor modern times, I was younger, right? Um, I'm starting to notice that there are conformists in the modern times too. Now, of course, the fringes of society, the folks that are very odd in terms of the standard deviation curve exist in every society. Perhaps it is not recorded in history, or at least one has to do a huge amount of interpretation, and some of it is risky in terms of perhaps not being correct. But for the ones that are on, so the point is, and also it's like you always wondered, you know, like it's not the bystander effect. It's basically the thought process of like it's not so much logical fallacies, but that's a great example. Um, you know, um, Logical fallacies is I'm not gonna list I didn't memorize them, but there's a bunch of these ones. I think Occam's razor is one of them. Piel authority. I don't know. I mean, there's tons of astronomy. You like there's like a ton of them. I can't list them all, much less give a lecture on that. But I think the points I made in a previous video, I list them here. The equivalent of even in ancient empires and Middle Ages, there's money. The equivalent of a car, is a chariot in the ancient times, and of course the house. Um, so death is something one can fear, but it's not in people's immediate thoughts. Now, marketing might be not the same thing in ancient times. We all understand that marketing and advertising is a thing in the modern times, but in the ancient times, the equivalent of completing a college degree. I haven't really studied the history, so I can't come up with the equivalent. But there are employees. They call them merchants. I don't know if that's quite the correct word. I'm not a historian, but you still see the same things. There's, I mean, not identical, obviously, but you see the type of person that understands what gets the person's product. Um, so these are just temporary things, and I'm not going to be a spiritual guru and go around this over and over. Um, but you know, the point I'm making with this video is when I was younger, I used to think that modern times is much better. We invent the invention of computers, the invention of refrigerators, the invention of um, extremely efficient sanitation methods. Very useful. Though I'll admit that the COVID virus was certainly the response to it was certainly inadequate, but for the most part, you don't see people dying of cholera. I always think that these advances may had an implicit bias to favor them. It turns out, despite the obvious primitiveness of ancient societies, um, to say that modern people are just plain better is just plain is not accurate. In terms of that's you can't just make that assumption that it's implicitly better in all ways. Is because you still see the same logical fallacies among I don't care how much protein powders you take to how much fish oil, how much omega-3. No. Yeah, it's not the most. Yeah, I mean, obviously that contributes to obviously the average height being much taller. For example, or it's really not the easiest thing to measure IQ across. Um, the average person in the upper class in the ancient time, and you can't really do things like that. But objectively, the average height is. But that might be the only thing that is on a higher scale. In terms of but let's try to elaborate this further. See the present moment versus the past future. Hierarchical, cliquey versus inclusive. We all know in history there's been a higher cliques of, for example, the upper class people, right? They did things that a lot of people in the lower class could not do, especially in the ancient and Middle Ages. Like you see, obesity is extremely rare from until maybe for until the 1950s. Because before that, it was usually the upper class that had overweight. For example, and then there's emphasis on speech patterns versus other things. Um, certain groups, favored death, other groups favored breath, right? We all know that, religion is a thing from ancient times, Middle Ages, industrial time, So these three eras that make up most of human history, religion, usually there's those that valued actions, and then there's those that are just strictly religious and prefer just the beliefs. We all know Jesus is in the actions group in terms of not really into organized religion, honest, right? But these things exist in the modern times too. Which is something I learned while I was a perceiver when I got older, right? When I was younger, I really didn't think much of this. Let's see. Values you have affect choices you make. Your interpretation affects the choices you will make. Let's see. You can't make the choice. This is something I recently learned from Quora, that you can make the choice of where you're born, right? You can make a choice to be born, or to, of course, ask for a miscarriage and change your mind. That is something that is made. You chose, but that's what I learned core. But the problem with the interpretation is that like so many historians, archaeologists, when you're conducting research, there's a major problem. The interpretation of the writings that are observed is difficult, and you have to understand. You have to conduct a lot of research on the culture, on the linguistic, and the religion background, right? So they have to do this research to understand the interpretation of the writer, right? When you look, when digging these artifacts, they have to understand that someone's interpreting it. It may not be, and to dig for to get arrive at the conclusion of what's the fact and what's an opinion is something reserved for the college professors, with the PhDs, right? So, but this idea of interpretation is more personal in terms of the choices you get to make when you reach the afterlife. You can choose to wait 1,000 years to incarnate. You can choose to incarnate as soon as 100 years. There's a huge difference. But you can choose to incarnate, for example, 100 years later, when many decades after World War III ended, hang out with the Native Americans. Or you can choose to wait 1,000 years, and most likely it'll be a different parallel universe or a different alternate Earth, and you get to pick which era you want. Right? You could pick any era you choose. But of course, whatever choice you can't make, objectively, is your choice. Because of the circumstances we have here, that for most part, humans, most part, let's just say 300, 400 years later, the amount of available opportunities, I'm going to call it, is dwindling. Like, I'm sure that it's just not something that people would look for. So you would look for it, for example, in a different alternate, right? You get to pick which ones, right? You can pick any alternate if you wish. Now, I'm not saying there are thousands of them. There might be. I don't know about that, but I know that you can choose which one you want. Now, you can choose an alternate Earth. Say you waited 1,000 years, and you just count as a gap, right? You can choose an alternate Earth that is in the Middle Ages. Or you can choose the one that is currently in the modern times. Basically, repeat the same life you had. Obviously, the country names might be completely different, or if the country names are the same, might be in a different continent. You might see America in like Asia, or you might see I don't know, England and like the America. It would look completely different. Flags would be different, perhaps even the language. But hopefully not the language. But like, you might see the American Empire be near the equator. We might have an alternate Earth with like a huge ice age. I'm just saying, like, the possibilities are endless. But yeah, waiting 1,000 years, in this alternative, you're likely not to recognize anyone, and there's a lot of people who've been through this. But I'm not an expert in this subject, but like this, you can, let's say you wanted to reincarnate in, I don't know, like the ancient, like, or which alternate Earth is this? Right, this is Earth number 222 or 22222, right? Or Earth number 100 or 101. I don't know. Maybe you can't really assign a number to these, right? I'm just saying, Earth number 5 or Earth number 7. It's not really. We call this Earth 1, right? So yeah, you can pick which one. Obviously, the New Age community is all these buzz terms like, you know I don't know, star seeds, one of them. soulmate's another buzzword. Twin flame. I heard all these random words. Don't take these words too personally. Just made up. I'm sure if you find another religion and conduct like months of research, you'll find the same things. You just have to make a table chart, and basically have equivalencies. It's like, oh, the Starseed is this one random religion in the Middle East or Asia or South America. They called it this word, right? If you do that kind of research, that'd be great. But, it makes things much easier. Let's see. But the thing with a gap year, not really, it's not really a gap year if you think about it. No, it's really not. Because you're just jumping from one world to another. The same. If you pick the same alternative. But this video is gonna be really, really crazy long. So here's another one: the million floor skyscraper. You don't access these floors by stairs or elevators because there is no status. The million floor skyscraper, you cannot visit every floor because each floor has say about 100 people, right? You cannot realistically visit every floor. You can probably visit, even in a gap year, you could probably visit like 20 floors. Like with a bunch of people in it. But yeah, like that's probably the most. That's a gap year. You can visit 20 floors. Most people do not conduct a gap year. Most people do something between, I don't know, like 20 years and 200, right? So that you might be able to visit 3 floors, right? So it's a huge difference between visiting 3 floors and 20. Yeah. um, Visiting 3 floors in a case that you could meet a lot of different people, right? But 20 floors is probably enough for completing 2 college majors in, I don't know, for example, Asian studies. I'm Asian, right? Or African American studies. That's certainly quite a lot. Quite a major one could learn. Oh, you could be a history major. Yeah, I'm just saying, like. Let's see. Alright, let's see what else. But just beware, a lot of stuff on the afterlife, on the internet, especially New Age, is sugar coated. Especially on Quora, some other websites, but sugar coated too. So, let's see. With Myers-Briggs topology indicator. In alternate Earth. There's a lot of because this I could describe. There's a lot people with extrovert thinking. So, see, it could be very unusual in many ways because like I read the stuff on in the history books. You got stuff like slavery and stuff right. You got clearly examples of extrovert thinking among certain leaders. But if it's like an alternate Earth with a completely different history, you wouldn't be able to recognize the map. It might take you several weeks to, let's say you read a map of this alternate Earth, it takes you several weeks to understand what's going on. Like, you used to memorizing, say, United States of America, Canada, North of it, Mexico, South of it. You're remembering the Aztec Empire, where Mexico is, yeah. Or, you can recognize where England, Spain, France, Germany, Roman Empire, Greek Empire. You recognize these empires where they are, right? You recognize where the Persian Empire is, which is modern day Iraq and Iran. You know where Babylon is. You recognize where Persian Empire. You know where India is. India's a little east of that, the southwest of China. You know where these are. But in this new map, you wouldn't be able to recognize. Like say it'll take you a while to get used to. reading the map, right? Like you're not used to seeing China at this continent, or you're not used to seeing or America's the Aztecs and the Olmecs, and you're not used to them somewhere else, and then you have to know, and then there's a bunch of new empires you never heard of. That can be a little tricky, right? You know, not only is that it's also tricky because you know you're new to this planet. You're practically an alien, even though it's the same Earth. Yeah, it's the same things. But you're basically you're basically, it's like your first incarnation in some point, right? Where you know, so extrovert thinking will be certainly something, but certainly stuff from your experiences you had from previous life. It will prepare for this alternate Earth with this very strange map that you cannot recognize. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's something that could take a while to prepare for, and I think the folks in the afterlife, there's a lot of good people, right? There's a lot of good entities, right? So, because again, you're not confined by the physical body, you're not concerned on the temporary things, which is a money, car, house. You're concerned more about the million floors. Let's see. And of course, values, interpretation, and choice. So, but yeah, when I was younger, I didn't really understand, particularly the million floors idea. That really didn't make sense to me when I was younger, because like I've seen skyscrapers, and maybe there are 20 floors, 30 floors, right? But a million floors, like, could not conceptually grasp, because for a million floors, that would, I would normally think, oh, no one could build it, but it's not, the idea of it isn't, like I might not understand that you can't access these floors by stairs and elevators. So yeah, it's a very different idea. It's conceptually much different. Even if you were to tell me this when I was younger, I would have understood, by this description, but that idea I would have never originally came up with, because this idea is very close, more like extrovert intuition, where you have all these ideas. Um, some of it connects more loosely than others, right? That's something that is a concept I learned when I got older. But when I was younger, I didn't really understand it, right? So, so the thing with the million floors is, I mean, this video's super long. I congratulate if you actually watched this far. I do apologize for disabling comments. So, the thing is, when I was younger, I didn't really understand that, that death is something one can fear, but is not in people's immediate thoughts. Um, you know, I also had a hard time, clarifying, for example, emphasis on speech patterns versus other things, or difference between values you have affecting the choices, and difference between your interpretation affecting the choice. I also, when I was younger, I understood the difference between actions and beliefs in religion and death and breath, but I may have not, connected it to emphasis on speech patterns when I got older. So, I understood what a clique is when I was younger, but, I would have not compared it to religion and spirituality, particularly New Age. So, and I certainly would have connected it to Myers-Briggs topology, which I did not learn until, until I took the advanced placement exam. So, or like a month or two before that. So, this is a very long video. Uh, so yeah, but the effect of like if someone chooses an alternate Earth as opposed to a different planet, you went. I mean, you went a different planet. At least you got talking animals. You got a bunch of other cool items that would never have existed. Uh, but despite the obvious familiarity of the basic concepts, um, the differences in the history and the empire placement, maybe having an ice age, or for example, like I can't think of an example. Some random event like a meteorite destroying one continent but not the others, or let's see if I can come up with an example. Let's see. Uh, that's all I can come up with. But let's see. But there's but in this way there is no status because when a person makes the choice to incarnate in different alternate Earth or as opposed to a different parallel universe or a different planet, um, there is no status in this way because you're with a very different yeah, like a question I mean arises is the afterlife composed of different people, and that's what this confuses me because the idea of a million floors is the best example because one cannot adequate even in a gap year of the 2,000 to 2,000 years one can realistically only visit 20 of those floors, but there are a million floors you cannot visit them all. That means that there are floors for our alternate Earths and all the billions of people that have resided there, right? So that is the idea that I came up with when I got older. It's just an analogy. It's not really a skyscraper, right? A skyscraper is just a conceptual idea, analogy, right? So, like one, but what? But again, you don't access all these floors from stairs and elevators. That's impossible. Uh, skyscraper. This is the afterlife. It's not measured in the same way that we can measure a skyscraper with a gravitational pull. That doesn't work like that in the afterlife. And because of that, because the gravitational pull, the difference between that and it does confuse some people. Because it's not like you can easily demonstrate gravity in a laboratory tutorial in a school environment, but the reason why religion is a lot more controversial, you know, every country has some law prohibiting this type of instruction in public school. Private school, there is still some laws for that because it may violate, for example, the First Amendment for the United States. I'm not aware about the details in other countries, but there are certain things that cannot be preached even in a private school. Because I'm not aware of the details on this, but I mean, because religion is a controversial topic. There's lines of what can be taught, um, because it's not really the freedom of religion clause, but is you agree to be it's like a private school is a product where you pay a tuition, right? But you're not like religion is a little tricky because it is not it's more than just about speech. It is about a bunch of other things. I don't have the legal terminology. So, but what I know is when I mentioned emphasis on speech patterns, planet Earth and alternate Earths, speech is a major lesson one can learn, because in different eras, languages. For example, in the modern times, after say the late 20th century, we have the ability to communicate with different languages on the internet. We also have all this software that can make it very easy without having to pay money for a translator. We also have the ability to learn languages at a very accelerated pace, and we can learn it at any time with the internet. It is not quite like that earlier than the mid 20th century. Prior to that, there's considerable difficulties. Um, so that is a major lesson one can learn in Planet Earth. Is the lesson of emphasizing speech patterns versus other things. Um,